Good afternoon, everyone. I am Kristina Egan. I'm the Executive Director of the Greater Portland Council of Governments. I'm so glad that you're all here. Today is a positive forum. We'll talk a little bit about problems, but we're going to talk a lot about infrastructure solutions. And we have municipal managers and planners, economic development directors here in the audience today, state legislators and state agency folks, developers, utility executives, transportation folks, community advocates. And one of the reasons why we've gathered you all here today is that we know that we have to work together in order to address the housing challenge. It's too big and it's too urgent for just one group to do alone. We know also that we need to build about 80,000 new units in Maine to meet the demand for today of our residents, of our kids that want to come home, and for our workforce of the future. And it's not really a nice to have goal, it's really an economic imperative. In fact, when we do our economic development planning at GPCOG, housing is the #1 thing that we need in order to make sure that our economy can succeed. So I think all of you understand that, especially those of you who are municipal employers. I know that workforce challenges or bus agencies looking for bus drivers, right? We just don't have enough people. And part of that issue is because we don't have literally enough units, and the units that we have are not affordable for people that are working families. Many of you are with us in March 2024. We had our first and only housing summit at that point, and we were really focused at that time on defining the problem and understanding what some of the policy solutions might be. I'm glad to say that progress has been made in those 2 years, and we know that because Rick Harbison, our planner, is actually tracking the number of building permits that all of the municipalities are building. This is good news for the state who set the statewide goal. It's also good news for our residents who need to have the housing. In the last few years, all of you know, well, let me see, how many of you have heard of LD 2003? Okay, how about 1829? Okay, yes, knowledgeable crowd. This is significant legislation that's fundamentally changed the way that the state is approaching housing production. And in response to that, all of you who are part of communities have really updated your zoning ordinances, allowing for greater density and more diverse housing options. But we've learned something in those 2 years, that policy changes alone are not putting roofs over heads. Zoning that allows for apartment buildings doesn't help if the water and sewer systems can't handle the additional capacity. Welcoming higher density development doesn't work if our roads are gridlocked or if we can't get around without a car. And encouraging growth means nothing if the electrical grid can't support it, if broadband can't reach it, or if stormwater is going to flood it. So we've learned that the lack of adequate infrastructure is a major barrier to housing development, particularly high-density housing development, which is what the state is asking us to build. So we're here today at this summit to talk about the infrastructure that has to accompany and support this kind of housing. And we're going to talk today about how to plan for it, how to pay for it, which is a really big deal, and then how we deliver it at kind of a pace and scale that this housing shortage really demands. We also talked to many of you in advance of this summit, and we have an understanding of your perspectives. From the municipal perspective, which I'm most familiar with, I know that we are caught in a bind. The state is pushing for more housing production. Your residents need those options, and you get it, you want to be part of that solution, but you're operating with limited budgets, aging infrastructure, and with a responsibility to your residents to manage that growth in a way that also preserves your natural areas and your open space. When a developer proposes 100 new units, for example, you're asking, where do we want that growth to go? If we do find a place that it should go, can we handle the wastewater? Can we handle the traffic, the emergency services? What is the impact on our schools? And of course, who is going to pay for the upgrades that we need in that infrastructure? For our developers, and we'll hear from developers today, you're trying to respond to market demand and local zoning and permitting processes, but the infrastructure uncertainty creates a lot of financial risk. And if you can't get clear answers, say, about sewer capacity or timelines or what the permitting process is going to look like, then you can't necessarily make the project pencil out, and it becomes too risky to pursue. For our state partners who are in the room, you're planning infrastructure on long time horizons, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And housing demand is urgent and it seems unpredictable, and you need to balance out building that capacity proactively with being good stewards of taxpayer money. So these are all competing interests that all of us are balancing all the time, and they are interconnected challenges that we need to work with one another in order to get housing built. So what are we trying to accomplish today? First, we're trying to identify the specific infrastructure constraints that are out there: water, wastewater, electrical grid. What about our transportation networks? And then we want to talk practically about how we develop adequate infrastructure. Transportation systems that reduce car dependency, for example, clean water systems that can handle growth that may be at a regional level, and solid waste management that scales appropriately. Second, we have to discuss funding and cost sharing. There's not enough money at the municipal level or the state level or the federal level or the developer level to do it. So we're going to need to work together to figure out how we can do some of that cost sharing and figure out how to pay for it. And third, we need to balance development with community values. People really care about open space. It's one of the reasons they moved to Maine. It's one of the reasons that they moved to, wow, these are beautiful. All right. Yeah, so they moved to Maine because they care about the tree cover or the environmental resources, the land. And we need to grow in ways that preserve that for our residents. And all the development can't just be in southern Maine just because we have better infrastructure. We really need to make sure that we're developing in places that make sense, that keep that quality of life for our residents. And fourth, we have to deal with climate resilience. We can't build housing in areas that are going to flood more and more frequently or become uninhabitable. And we need to think seriously about something that's really hard, which is managed relocation where appropriate, and building resilient housing, and how infrastructure, particularly transportation infrastructure and electrical infrastructure, can withstand the climate challenges we have ahead. So at the end of this gathering, we hope to surface state and municipal actions that will actually make a difference, and what policy changes are needed, what regulatory barriers can be removed. Where do we need, and this is really important, where do we need better coordination between the state, municipalities, utilities? And how can we develop the resources to deal with that? So the structure of today's program is you're first going to hear from municipal officials. These are town managers and planning directors who are working to accommodate growth and shape that growth so that it can meet the community's vision. They're going to share what's working and what's not and what some of the barriers are that they're facing. Then you're going to hear from some state agency leaders about how they see themselves supporting you, municipalities, and how they're thinking about infrastructure planning and how they're coordinating across state agencies to make it easier for you to access them. We also have Speaker Ryan Fecteau, who's going to join us from the state, and he'll talk about the legislature's efforts to address some of the infrastructure needs that come along with the state's goal for more high-density housing. We've got some public transportation and active transportation leaders that are going to talk about how we can plan transportation in a way that allows more people to get around by walking and biking, using trails and public transportation. And we'll hear from utility providers about the planning, capacity, and coordination challenges. We've got a lot going on today. And then we're going to hear about developers about what they're experiencing on the ground, where the infrastructure challenges are making projects impossible and the costs don't work, and then what would actually help. So the thing that I want to emphasize to all of you before we kick right off is we really have an opportunity to make some solid, good progress on housing. Housing, as you know, is a very complicated thing to do. There are a lot of reasons why housing is built or isn't built. But I've seen many issues, in my career, I've seen many issues come and go. They rise to the front and then they fade away. And with housing, we have policy leadership right now. We have communities that are being hit by a lot of growth and know that they need to manage it in a way that's better. And we have a general public awareness that the housing shortage is really hurting Maine. So to me, this is aligning the stars for a moment where we can actually make some real progress on this issue. And I'm excited to have this forum be really focused on solutions. And I'll just say that, planning for infrastructure, even paying for it, is not mysterious. But what's really hard is imagining that we're all on the same team. And I've watched over the last couple of years how I think state and cities and towns have been almost talking past each other. And what I'm hoping for today, we have a couple breaks that are scheduled into the program today. What I'm hoping is I'm going to encourage each of you to introduce yourself to somebody you don't know. Try to understand their perspective a little bit more and see if you can find some common ground, particularly with the state and municipal relationship, because that's where we can actually make progress on housing. It's the state policy and the local zoning that sets the table for housing to be produced. And so we need to find a way where we can lock arms and really understand one another to move forward. And I think we can all agree that infrastructure is needed. So that's an easy way for us to start to build a stronger partnership between the local level and the state level. So with that, I am very pleased to introduce Jamie Garvin. He is GPCOG's Director of Community Affairs, and he is a previous municipal elected and was a chair of a council. He also has worked for Maine, which provides regional waste management services. And he is going to kick off a panel for you with our municipal perspective about the challenges that you all are facing on the ground as you're looking to develop more housing.